Hey guys, this is Chubbs back again with another SnapMap tutorial, and today I'm going to be showing you how to design your very own custom auto map. I uploaded a video a few days ago showing the custom auto map in action, but in that video I really didn't go into great detail about how to design it, so that's sort of what this video is going to be. First of all, before we get to designing the auto map, let's just look at the map that I've set up for us. So we have the just the regular player start room here. You have a hallway that you go into. The hallway leads to this sort of open arena-like room, and then finally you have just a basic exit room here and an elevator. So a very straightforward map. What I really wanted to go for though was rooms with a little bit of variety in their shape. So the starting room, you can see, could sort of be represented by a square. This hallway would be great for a rectangle. This sort of a arena-like room here could be represented in a number of ways. We could have sort of a wide rectangle and maybe something sticking off the edge here. And of course the exit room could also, just like the player start room, could also be represented by a square. So I just wanted to have a little bit of variety there, and really just wanted to show you guys the basic map setup that I had going on here. But what we're going to do though, we're going to design this auto map out here in a what I like to call a dummy room, which is this observation module. This is just a big module. This is a good module to use for dummy room purposes. This is just going to be a room that the player cannot access, but that will contain the auto map stuff. That way the auto map can sort of be laid out and everything like that, and displayed through a camera lens, but the player will never actually be inside this room. This observation room is also great for logic, like if you want to set up a whole bunch of logic sort of outside of the playable area, and that way you could sort of have like this big room just dedicated to doing stuff behind the scenes. So just a really good module or room piece to use for that, and it really doesn't use all that much memory. But first things first, if you watch the video, you'll notice that the map, or the auto map, had a sort of like a black background behind it, and so that's what we're going to set up first, and we're just going to lay that out on the floor, because the basic premise of this auto map is that we're going to lay out the map sort of along the floor here, and then we're going to have a camera that's up in the air looking down at the auto map. So first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to set up that black base. So to do that, we're going to use a player blocking volume. So just open up your objects list, navigate to the volume section, and then go over here to player blocking volume. You can go ahead and place the volume if you want to, and then just exit out of the add object mode and go to the volume that you placed and pull up its properties. Now what you want to do here to make it black is first change it from the render model from transparent to solid, and then over here on color, just change it from 255 across the board to 0 across the board. Once you do that, you can see it gives you a nice solid black color. We also want to make one other change here. We want to make it so that this shows up when the map starts. You can see here we have sort of a like an eyelid icon above it. That means that it's not visible at the start of the game. We definitely don't want that. We want the black background to always be visible. So go ahead and go back into the properties and change show on start to be true, because we do want it to be shown on start, and we want this to be visible at all times. Now since this is going to be a base, we're going to want this thing to be pretty big to cover really most of the room and most of the ground in here. So we can go ahead and just go back into the properties and change both the depth and the width to the largest possible value. In SnapMap's case, the largest value that you can give a player blocking volume is 2048. So we'll go ahead and do that for both the depth and the width. And you can see that's a massive player blocking volume, but even though it is quite massive, it still doesn't fill up the entire room. It fills up most of it, but there's as you can see, there's still a little bit of space around the edges. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and sort of center it a bit. You know, I don't care about it being perfectly centered, because we're just going to use this just as a basic background layout. We don't need it to be perfectly aligned or anything like that. And then one last step that I'm going to take is I'm going to change its height from 64 to 8. And what that will do, that will sort of make it like a thin sheet. If I highlight it here, you can kind of tell it's not very thick now, and that'll come into play here in just a little bit once we start to add our room pieces. So now that we've given it the correct color and also made it the correct size, let's just go ahead and lower it straight down to the ground so it lays there perfectly. You can do that just by selecting it and pressing Z, and that will lower it right there to the ground. I'm not sure what the control is if you're using a controller on consoles, but it should show you there when you select it down at the bottom. But once it's laying perfectly flat like this, you're pretty much good to go. So we've got the background or the base set up. So now what we want to do is we want to lay out the rooms by also using player blocking volumes, and we want it to look as close to our map as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you definitely want it to be similar enough to where the player can look at it and and make sense of it. So let's go right back out here to blueprint mode, and if you press V a couple times, you can go into this really simplified mode here, or like a simplified visual mode that gives you a really good sense of how the rooms are shaped. So this player start room, like I said earlier, even though it has these sort of the corners, even though the corners have sort of been cut out, it could still be represented really well with a square. So we'll just do that for the player start room. We'll do the same thing for the elevator here for the exit. These can both be squares. This hallway would be great for a rectangle, like I said, and then we'll work on this once we get to it, the arena. For now, let's start with the player start room. Like I said, we'll just use a square for that. So let's go right back into object mode and let's start to lay it out. So first things first, let's go ahead and add a brand new player blocking volume. And once again, we're going to change it to be solid. Now, we're not going to change it to be shown on start, and that will also come into play here in just a little bit. I'll get into why that is, but we do want this to be invisible at the start of the game. Now the size is pretty important here. I want this to be a perfect square, so I'll go ahead and I'll make both the depth and the width 64. That's a pretty good number for those. And so if we fly above it here, you can see it's a perfect square. And here is where the if we pull up the size, you can see the height is 64. This is where the height of our base comes into play. So if you remember, we gave our base a height of 8, and what we're going to do is we're going to give the room here, or what's going to eventually become the room, a height of 16. And so what that will do, if we select the piece here and lower it into the ground, if we go down to it, you can kind of see that since we've given it a height of 16, 8 units of this are inside the base, and then 8 units of it are sticking up out of the base. And so this allows you to perform the lower to ground action and still have a little bit of it pop up so that it's visible. If we just gave it a height of 8 just like the base, then if we did the lower to ground thing, then it would just be like inside the base, and we would have to try and manually raise it up to just be visible enough, and it would really just be a pain to work with. So this is just a nice little trick, and it will just really save you a lot of time and effort on down the line. But now that we've lowered this, let's go ahead and give it a brand new color. White. There's nothing wrong with a white color, but in the video I used, or in the video I uploaded, I used a sort of a light blue color, and you can get that by changing the red value to 0 and then just leaving green and blue at 255. So you can see we now have a nice sort of light blue square room. So this will represent our player starting room. I'm going to try and just rotate it just right, make sure everything's aligned here, and that looks good. So this is the player start room. Next, let's go back out, and you can see that the next room we want to lay out is going to be our hallway. So let's go right back in, and instead of creating a new volume and going through all those steps, let's just duplicate this one. So we will duplicate it, move it out here a bit, lower it down, align it. There we go. We don't have to, here in just a little bit we're going to try and space them apart just right. We're not going to do that just yet though. For now I'm just sort of worried about the shape. So if we go out and look, we can see it's just about as tall as our player start room. So all we really have to do is just make it more narrow. So that's really easy to do. We'll just go here to the size, and we will change, not the depth, that's the wrong value, we will change the width. Let's just cut it in half. Instead of 64, let's go 32. So there we go. We have our hallway in place. Like I said, we'll space them apart just right here in just a second. While we're at it here, let's go ahead and get the exit room out of the way. Remember that I said it's going to be a square. Let's go ahead and just copy the start room. We'll just move it right up here, and we've got that out of the way. So now all that we're left with is this sort of arena room. So I think what I'm going to do is, I think I'm just going to do a similar room to the hallway, sort of a rectangle, but we're going to widen it just a little bit more, and we're also going to put a maybe a little tiny rectangle right here sticking out like a little bulge. So let's go ahead and let's get to work on that. So we will we'll just copy the hallway, move it up here. Let's try and just make it a little bit wider. Let's do 48 and see how 48 looks. Let's see. That, I don't think that's quite wide enough. Let's do, let's see. I have an idea here. Let's just try doing this. Let's try giving it a perfect square shape, and then what we'll do for the bulge is we will just copy, bring it out, make this smaller. Let's go down to 32 for this. Let's just do a perfect square, 32, 32, and let's try and put it on the edge. It doesn't have to be perfect. Alright, and that looks pretty good to me. Looks like we've got a pretty close representation of that room. It's not perfect, but like I said, all you have to do is just sort of get it close so that it at least somewhat represents the room. Alright, so we've got our rooms laid out here. They are not spaced apart just right. Like I said, we'll sort of get to that. For now, what we're going to do, I'm just going to sort of move these rooms out a little bit just to give some extra breathing room between them, because we're going to start to add our doors. So this is going to be our next step. We'll go ahead and just add the doorways. You can see each room just has one doorway, so it's going to be really easy to do. But for the doors, what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and copy this again, and copy pasting is going to save you a lot of time. And what we're going to do, we're just going to resize it and also recolor it. The doors we can just make white. That'd be an okay color for them. So just change all of the colors here to 255, and we're going to make the doors quite small. Let's just make the doors 16 by 4. You can see the door's kind of facing the wrong way, so you can rotate it just like you rotate any object and get it just right. And we'll try and put the door right here where it actually is on the map. And one trick here that I think probably a lot of people don't realize is that you can change the grid size here in SnapMap to get you a close fit or space objects apart further and things like that. And if we can do that by pressing F1, by the way. And if we bring the grid size up, you can see right now it's at 8. That's already quite small. Yours will probably be quite bigger than that by default. I think I lowered mine to 8 earlier. But to get it just right, similar to the example that I showed you, I lowered the grid size all the way down to 4 for the doors. So if we take it down to 4, we can get the doors quite close. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. You can get the doors pretty close here if you use the snap to grid function, and if you fly above it you can see it's got just a little bit of space between the room, but it looks pretty nice. So what I'll do, I will go back up to 8 and I'll make sure the rooms align just right. Okay, now let's bring the hallway here and connect it to the door. And this will take a little bit of time fiddling with it. I think our doors, it's actually off center here a little bit. The hallway's just right. Let's move the door over to the right from this perspective a little bit. Just move it over to the right, about like that. You can see it's starting to look pretty nice. We have a door and a hallway. Let's go ahead and create another door, because if we pull up the map you can see at the end of the hallway, of course, there's another doorway. So we'll just copy paste this one and bring it over here, and let's look at our grid size. Yeah, we're back to 4. That's okay. So let's put a door at the end of the hallway and just try and get it aligned. And I apologize for swinging the camera everywhere here. I'm just trying to get a good look at things. Okay, that looks fine, I think. And now we want to make sure that the doorway is connected to the sort of arena room. So if we look at our map, looks like it's near the bottom. We'll just put the door at the bottom center, even though here in the actual map it's a bit over to the left. We'll just do the bottom center because it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm just going to go back up to grid size 8, and notice that for the rooms I'm doing grid size 8, and for the doors I'm doing grid size 4. What that does is it allows there to be nice space for the rooms, like between the doors. And if you do grid space 4 for the doors, it allows the doors to have a nice, like a close fit to the rooms without being connected to the rooms. It's sort of hard to explain, but you know, for me, a grid size of 8 for the rooms works great, and a grid size of 4 for working with the doors seems to be best. So there we go. Just make sure we got everything aligned here. I think it looks pretty good now. Looking pretty good. So all we have to do now is just put one extra door and then connect the sort of arena here to what is our exit room. So let's go back down to 4, because again we're using 4 for the doors. Let's copy paste the door, put it right here, because if we go to our map you can see the doorways right here on the bulge. So we'll place the door there, and I'll just sort of try and center it up here, even though it's not actually perfectly centered on the map. Just make sure that it's looking alright. Okay, and for the exit room, once again go back up to 8 for rooms, and we'll just sort of center it up here with the exit room. Like I said again, just to repeat myself, it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it's just a close representation of the map, you're good. So here we go. We're pretty much done with the layout. So if you look here and then we go back to the map, that's a pretty close representation of the actual thing. So that's great. So now we really only have to design one more thing here on the Automap, and what we need to do is we need to sort of place the player, or at least something that represents the player, in the center of each of these rooms. So we'll do that also with the player blocking volume. So let's just let's copy a door. Might as well just go ahead and just grab a door, and let's change some of its properties. We want the player to be represented with a we'll do a yellow color, and that will be 255, 255, 0. So make sure blue is 0. There we go. And the player's size, we want him to be a perfect square, but we also want him to be pretty small. So let's just do 8 by 8. That's perfect. So you can see he's a perfect square. He's not too big, not too small. And the thing with the player, we want him to kind of poke up through the room, because we're going to be putting him in the center of the room. So remember that the room has a height of 16, and I want the player to poke up quite a bit. So let's just go ahead and double that. So let's grab the player, and instead of 16 we will change it to 32, and that way he will have 16 units sticking up, because the room's width, or the room's height, is 16, and the player is going to sort of have 16 added to that, since his height is 32. And just to prove that, if we grab the player and we align him and then lower him to the ground, you can see he has 16 units sticking up here. And he actually, it won't be 16 units, I don't think, sticking up. I could be wrong. I might have the math messed up here, because I'm leaving out the base's height, which is 8. So that, I think I'm leaving off a few here. So I think it would be pretty much 32 minus 16 minus 8, I think, is the actual how many units of the player sticking up. But nonetheless, you can see there's a decent amount of the player sticking up out of the ground, and that's going to be great for us. I'm just going to go back to a grid size of 8, which we don't have to go back to because we're already there. Let's just rotate the player so he's rotated just right, and just sort of align him in the center of this room. And now let's do this for each of the rooms. So I'm just going to try and sit him near the center of the rooms. So put him near the center of the hallway, and this doesn't have to be perfect either. And this room doesn't really have a clear center, so I'm just going to put him, let's see, we'll just stick him right there. That would be fine. And then for the exit room, much like the player start room, just put him dead center here in the square. Alright, so you can see we now have the players in each of these rooms. And again, notice that all of these pieces are not shown by default. They all have those icons, those eyelid icons above them. That's very important, and I'm about to show you why that is. But before we do that, what we're actually going to do, we're going to run a quick test here just to make sure that everything is set up just right. So first, let's grab a camera, which you can go to under gameplay, and this should be the last one here. And let's place the camera sort of high above the map. And one way that you can, a little trick for you to make sure that the camera is directly above something, is when you're highlighting it, notice that there's sort of a white line extending down from the camera. You can sort of aim that white line over whatever you want to center it over, and that will sort of guide you. So I don't want it to be centered over the player start room. I think I just want it to be centered over the map as a whole. So I'm just going to put it, I guess right there would be fine, but I don't want it to be that low, I don't think. Let's try and raise it a little bit. This is really the trial and error part, because in SnapMap there's no way to look through the camera's lens. You just have to kind of test. So we'll just do that. And I want the camera to look at the map from the same perspective as I'm looking at it right here. So let's go ahead and just rotate the camera if we can find it. Here we are. So you can see the camera is kind of looking almost toward us here at an angle. I want to just rotate it like this. That way the camera is facing this way, and you'll sort of have an angle at it, just like the same way we're looking at it right here. And finally, the most important step is we want the camera to look straight down at the map. And to do that, all you have to do is go into the camera's properties, go to rotation, and change pitch to 90. That'll be a straight down look. Now another trick here, whenever you test it, if you can see a little bit too much or not enough, what you can do is you can change the FOV here instead of no, we definitely don't want to revert. But what I was saying there, you can change the FOV to a smaller or a larger value instead of like grabbing the camera and taking it up higher or bringing it down lower. So that's just a little bit of a shortcut for you, and it saves you a little bit of time. But anyways, we want to test it just to make sure that the height is right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sort of backtrack on something I said earlier. I'm going to show these on start just for now. I'm just going to do the start room and just this room up here. and this is just going to be purely for gauging. So now these two rooms are visible. I'm going to hide the player. No need to see the player, just the rooms. Okay, so the player start room's visible, and then this sort of arena room's visible. So this will be purely for testing. We're going to come back here just a second and make these rooms invisible again. But let's go ahead and just check and make sure that the camera's okay. So let's go to our player start, pull up his onSpawned event, and bring it over to the camera. And then just say enable camera. So as soon as we spawn, we will be looking through the camera's lens. So let's play and let's see what we got. So this will allow us to kind of see where the camera's at and whether or not we need to make any adjustments. So as soon as we spawn in, we should be looking through it. Alright, that's actually pretty dang good right there. We just about got it centered up. It's not quite perfect, but that's a great start. Pretty dang good for the first attempt. I think I'm actually just going to leave it like it is. What I'm going to do though, I think also just to kind of show you guys what I meant with the FOV, I'm just going to do a little demonstration here. Let's just go to the camera. Notice that in that little test I just did, we were kind of zoomed out a bit. Let's say you wanted to zoom the camera in. Instead of grabbing the camera and just bringing it closer to these blocking volumes, we could just go to it and just lower its FOV. So instead of 70, let's say we brought it down to 50. That's a pretty low FOV. If we go and we play now, once we spawn, you should see that we have a much closer view. It might be too close, I'm not entirely sure, but that's not too close. That's actually pretty dang good. So you can see though that it zoomed us in, and we're sort of panned, looks like we're panned up a bit. So I kind of like that FOV, but let's bring the camera just back this way just a little bit. And now let's play. And again, this is just trial and error. You definitely want to make sure your camera's set up okay. You just want to make sure your player has a good view of the map. And now I think I actually moved it up, or moved it down a little bit too far. So let's change the grid size to 4, and let's just move it back this way. You can see it's, like I said, just a little bit of trial and error. I might have just reverted it back to its old self, but I think this will be the last adjustment that I'm going to make, because I don't want to make you guys watch me do this adjustment here several times. Yeah, that'll work. It's not perfect, but it'll work. But you can fiddle with the camera and get it to look just right, but we're just gonna leave it like that. But what we're gonna do though, we're gonna go right back and just make these rooms invisible again, because again we were just doing that just to test the camera's distance and stuff. Alrighty, so what we want to do is we want to make it so that these rooms are only visible when the player is actually inside the rooms. And that's, believe it or not, it's extremely simple to do. All we have to do is first place a module object in each room, and we'll go ahead and we'll start to do that. The module object is under the gameplay section, and it's this sort of cube looking thing. And this object basically applies to the module or the room or prefab that it's placed in. So we'll place it, and you can put it anywhere. Let's go back to a grid size of 8. We'll just place it right here. Like I said, it can be anywhere. And if you go to it and press G, you can see that you have some options for different events. So you have on player entered and on player exited, and these two things are the key. So first we'll do on player entered, and what we're going to say is when the player enters this module or spawns into this module, since that technically counts as entering it, we want to show this room on the map. So let's go ahead, and the player start room is represented by this one right here, so we'll highlight this, click it, and we will say make visible. And just for the sake of being neat later on, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this icon just a little bit above the room, and you'll see why I'm doing this right here in the next step. So let's go right back, because what we also want to do is when the player, well, actually another way we can do it here, a quicker way actually, is go to the make visible, and this is already pointing to the room, but what we also want to do is we want to make the room's entrances visible, and in this case this room only has one entrance or doorway, and that's this one here. So instead of doing a brand new make visible, what we can do is go to the one that we already have, press G, and then link it to the door and click. So you can now see that it's linking to the room and the door. So that's just a little shortcut. But here's something that we will go back for. We'll go right back here to on player entered, press G to start a new connection, and what we're going to do, we're also going to say that when the player enters this room, the player icon will become visible to say this is where the player is right now. So highlight the player blocking volume that represents the player, which is again the little yellow cube, click, and then do make visible. Now remember that I said that I placed this one above the room for neatness sake, and that's where this is going to come into play. What we're going to do, since this one applies to the player, the little yellow cube, we're just going to set this one sort of on the ground near the player. And so now we'll do this from now on for all of our rooms, and this will make it so that we know that when we see the ones above the room, the make visibles above the room, this is applying to the room itself. And then the make visible that is right near the player, we know that it applies to the player, the little player cube. So we have that set up. Now one last thing we want to do is we want to make it so that when the player leaves this room, his player icon also leaves that room. So to do that, you can go to the module once more, pull up its logic wheel, and then go to on player exited. And what we're going to do, we're going to go over to the cube, the player cube once again, and we're going to say make invisible. So hide it again. And once again, I'm going to put it near the player right next to where make visible. So just to explain what we've done, we've made it so that when the player enters that module, the player start room, it's going to make the room itself here on the Automap visible, and it's also going to make the doorway in that room visible. And at the same time, it's going to make the little player cube visible. If the player leaves that room, however, the room's still going to be visible on the map. However, the player cube, the little yellow cube that says that the player is in this room, that will become invisible, and it will not be shown again unless the player re-enters that room. So really, that's all of it in a nutshell. So what we can do, I'm just going to make this look a little bit better. What we can do, we can grab these two things here, or these three things, the module and its two events, and we can just put them in each room. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we've placed it in the hallway, and like I said, it doesn't matter where in the room it's placed. It just matters that it's in the room. So we've got one in the arena, and then finally let's throw one here into the exit room. Alright, now here is the tedious part. You just need to go to each of these connections and match them up. So this is the hallway, remember. So we'll go to on entered, press G since it doesn't have an outbound connection, and we will link it to the hallway room. We'll do make visible, and let's put this one above the room, because remember, again, we've set up, I'm sort of coming up with a system where the make visibles that are floating above the room apply to the room, and then the make visibles that are near the player apply to the player. It's just sort of a neat way to lay it out, and it allows you to more easily come back to it and understand it when you look at it. Okay, so we've done that for the room. Remember though that we also want to do it for the entrances. So let's just go to this same make visible, press G, and this hallway has two entrances. It has a doorway on each side, so let's link it to this doorway, which the player start room is also linked to, but that's okay. You can have several links to the same doorway. And let's go to make visible, and let's link it to the other doorway. So now this make visible here applies to the room, which is the hallway, and it also applies to the doorways on each side. So that's great. Now we will do on exited again, And I actually, I got ahead of myself there. Let's stop that connection. I'll just press escape. Let's just do on player entered again, and this will be for the player cube. So we'll do make visible, and again we'll put this one near the player cube just to say that it's, or just to represent that it is for this cube. And then we'll do on exited, so that if the player leaves the hallway, the cube is made invisible. So let's go ahead and do that. And I feel like I've explained these steps pretty thoroughly, so now I'm just going to sort of rush through them here. I'm not going to take my time as much, so we'll do on player entered. This is for the arena now. Tie it to the arena. And this is sort of an interesting concept here because the arena has several shapes. We have a square in the middle, and then we also have a little bulge, but you can just do the make visible for the little bulge too, and it'll apply to that. So it's really not any different. Just make sure you make all the necessary connections. Alright, so the arena is almost finished. Hide the player when he leaves. Place it near him. And we still need to make the player visible, so we'll go ahead and do that when he enters. Make visible. Alrighty. Sort of a pain to do this with the keyboard because you can't have fine movement. It's probably easier to do this step here with the with a controller analog stick. Alright, and then all we have left now is the exit. So the exit room should be really simple to do. Just go ahead and link it up to the room itself. And on this same make visible, we'll go to the doorway. Alright, and all we have left now is the player in the exit room. So on entered, show the player. Alrighty. And on exited, hide the player. So this is the last step. Like I said, this is a tedious process. You have to do this for every room, and that's why when it's all said and done, you have lines going everywhere. So you can see if this were a bigger map with more pieces, we would have a ton of lines. So it's not complicated, it's just tedious. So we've set it up now so that when the player is in a room, the room's going to be on the auto map, and you're also going to see that the player is inside that room by the square. And if he leaves that room, the room is still going to be on the map, so you can see where it is in relation to the other rooms, but the player's icon is no longer going to be in that room. Instead, the player's icon, or the cube, is going to be in the room that the player's actually in at that time. So I believe we have pretty much done everything here. So really we only have one more step, and that is to make the auto map toggleable by pressing a key, and that's really simple to do. I'll just sort of go through this phase here. I feel like this is probably the easiest thing to do. Let's change the grid size to 16. You really don't have to do that, but I'm just going to do it just for this last part. So first of all, we will go to the player and team section and place a player input module, and you can place this anywhere. I'll just put it near the player start, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when the player spawns, enable the input. This just turns it on. And on the player input, if we go to its events, we'll do on pressed, and this is going to apply to the camera, so I'm just going to go ahead and drag us way out here near the camera. Alright, so what I'm going to say is when we press player input 1, which is a custom key, we will activate a let's see, we'll activate a sequencer. So we'll go ahead and just signal the sequencer. Let's go right back here because we've not actually specified the key yet. So when we did that just now, it created an on-pressed event. So go to the on-pressed properties and change input to you can change it to whatever you want to pull up the Automap. We're just going to do user input 1. Alright, so what we want to do, we want to make it so that when we press it, it pulls the Automap up, and then if we press it again, the Automap closes. And a sequencer is great for that, because a sequencer, you can set it up so that it does things in a certain order, and then you can make it loop. So what we can do, we can make it so that on the first press it enables the camera, and then on the second press it disables the camera. And then if we make it loop, it just it keeps doing that. So if you press the key once, it shows it. If you press the key twice, it disables it. And then if you press the key a third time, it loops, so it shows it again, and it just kind of keeps going in that loop. So we'll say for the sequencer, this will be the first sequence. We will go to the camera and say enable it, and let's rename. Whoops, don't want to do that. Let's rename this sequence 1. So this is the first thing that's going to happen when the key is pressed. And now if the key is pressed again, go to the camera once more, and notice too that I did a brand new sequence, but we'll go to the camera and do disable. And for this we will say, we'll just rename it sequence 2. And this is the renaming it doesn't change its functionality. This is just something for us so that we know which sequence comes first. So we've now set it up so that the first press enables it and the second press will disable it. Just to make sure everything's correct, we'll go to the sequencer's properties. We definitely want repeat to be true. I explained that just a few seconds ago. Whoops, let's see. Never mind. When I pulled up the properties, the line going from sequence 2 to disable wasn't shown. I thought we might have goofed there. But like I was saying though, we want repeat to be true because of what I was explaining a few seconds ago about how it loops around, so that way you can keep pressing the key and turning the map on and off. We want to change this right here. What this says is whenever we call the sequencer, if it's false like it is right now, then it will just keep running through these sequences over and over and over again. And since repeat is true, it would pretty much be an infinite loop. So like if we pressed user input 1, then it would enable the camera, disable the camera, enable the camera, disable. It would just keep flying through those. What we want to do, we want to make this true, and if this is true, then only one of these sequences will run and then it'll stop. So when we first press the key, sequence 1 will run, which as you can see right now enables the camera, and then the sequencer will stop. And then if we press the key again, since sequence 1 had already run, it will run sequence 2, which disables the camera, and then it will stop. And since repeat is true, the next time we press the key, it will loop back around to sequence 1, and it will just kind of keep doing that loop as we press the key. Not an automatic loop, which would have happened if we had this set to false. So again, make sure that this is true. Run 1 output per signal. That's very important. But that, I think, is everything. I don't think I've left out any steps. This is a long tutorial, and I apologize if you guys have been bored by now, but I think we have covered every single step. So last but not least, let's hop right in and let's test it. Hopefully we won't have any bugs. If we do though, we'll see if we can figure out what's going on. But I think we have finally completed it. So we are in the starting room, so let's pull up the map with player input 1, which on PC is G by default. And you can see here we are in our starting room, and right ahead of us you can see the doorway. So let's go through and enter the hallway, and let's pull the map up. You can see we're in the hallway, and you can see both doorways, the doorway behind us, which we just entered, and the doorway ahead of us. Let's go into the arena room and pull up the map, and you can see the arena looks just like we made it, with the sort of the two squares connected, and also the doorway leading to the exit. And finally, if we go to the exit itself, or the exit room itself, you can see that the room shows up. I've noticed here that the Automap is sort of rotated just a slight bit. I think I actually screwed up the camera's rotation just a tiny bit, but it's really no big deal. But it does work. So, and something else that I really should have mentioned there as we were doing those Automap tests, I noticed a bug just now. I'm glad I brought that up. Let's see here. Yeah, so our player is not showing up here in these rooms. Notice that the player's yellow cube is not showing up. So let's trace that back and let's see if we can figure out what's causing that. That's kind of strange. So let's go to the player cube. Show on start false. That's correct. Let's go to make visible. And let's see what it's pointing to. So that's interesting. Let's go right back to the hallway. So one way you can sort of debug is you can go here to the lines and you can press V, and it allows you to sort of fly along these lines and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be. Oh, okay. I know what's going on now. A very important thing just came up. I'm so glad I caught this because this caused me some headaches earlier. It's a very simple thing, but it's very, very important, and I really shouldn't have missed this. I should have had this written down. What you need to do for this Automap system is go to your modules, pull up their properties. Whoops, that's actually the wrong thing. You need to go to the onPlayerEntered and make sure that run once is false. See, what was happening when we entered the room, the player cube was being shown, and once we left the room, the player cube was being deleted like it was supposed to be, or being hidden, I should say. However, since this was being set to run only once, when we went back into the room, the player cube wasn't being shown again. So that's extremely important. So make sure when you place these modules, you go to onPlayerEntered and you change run once to be false, because you don't want it to happen only once. You want this to happen every time the player enters the room. So it is a great thing that we tested that and found it. Otherwise, I would have left out a crucial step. So that's very good. So now let's test it, and the player, and I don't know who in the world that is. Somebody just tried to add me on Skype, but the player should show up here in every room. So we'll run through the rooms first. This would have worked anyways with their old system, because remember, the problem was when we went back into rooms. Alright, so we've shown up in every room. However, when we go back now, you can see that we are actually being tracked like we should be. So we're being removed from the rooms that we were once in, and we're being placed in the rooms that we are currently in. So it now works. So I apologize for leaving that step out there. But that's a very, very important step. Make sure that you make it so that it doesn't run only once for the onEntered event or action on the module. But that is everything. I know this has been a long-winded tutorial, a lot of steps to it, but I really wanted to cover this in detail because I think it's a really cool thing and a really important thing for big nonlinear maps to help people explore and not get lost. I really think this is very, very useful and very helpful, and will make your maps better. So I wanted to make this as thorough as possible to help all you guys make your own auto maps, and I really hope this has helped you guys. I don't think I've left anything out here. If you guys have any questions about this system or anything like that, just be sure and let me know. And I may also place some links in the description to the map examples that I've already made. That way you guys can pull those up too without having to do everything from scratch. But again, if you have any questions, just let me know. And this is Chubb signing out.